I'm Franz De Leon, the Director of the OST Advanced Science and Technology Institute, also the Interim Chair of the Governing Board. So join me tonight as we go to Spain and taste the future of connectivity. So first, I'll grab some videos to help me better explain my experience with FYUZ. So the first video will show the overall overview of the event and what can be expected as any participant attends that event. All right. So the event is called FYUZ because it is a fusion of gastronomy and the technical side of the future of connectivity. So the Telecom Infra Project, or TIP, hosted a FYUZ event from 25 to 27th of October this year in Madrid. So it featured 3 full days of industry-leading conference led by the ORAN Alliance, TIP, and Meta, respectively. So FYUZ included an exhibition featuring the leading providers of open and disaggregated network infrastructure products and solutions, as well as ample networking space. So maraming kwentuhan. So it hosted over 2,000 senior representatives from across the ecosystem, including operators, vendors, regulators, industry analysts, and journalists. So they came there to share and discuss their formula for success. So for this year, FYUZ also included a policy ambassadors program tailored specifically for our civil sector colleagues and ecosystem partners. So I was invited to present my insights on the Philippines' effort to advance Open RAN and other disaggregated and open technologies and future generation connectivity efforts in a more interactive workshop style session. So actually, to be honest, before coming to the FYUZ event, I was a bit intimidated. Why? Because I'm really not from the same industry as you would know. I came from an R&D institution, but caters mostly to the broad side of ICT and electronics, whereas this whole event is really geared as a meeting between technology players. But then again, as I experienced the whole 3-day event, it's not as imposing as it seems. So everybody was quite welcoming and they are quite friendly. All right, so for the day 1 and 2 of that conference, we have first the Open RAN Summit. So we have stakeholders from across the ecosystem that discussed how they create Open RAN recipes that draw on local ingredients, as they say, and cater to different use cases. So again, for the next slide, I'll show a video of what transpired during the first day of that event.
Hello and welcome to Mobile World Live's coverage of FYUZ 2022 from Madrid, where for the next 3 days we are tasting the future of connectivity. This unique event from the Telecom Infra project brings together stakeholders from across the industry to celebrate the parallels between gastronomy and telecoms innovation, sharing recipes for success in open and disaggregated networks. Day one began with the Open RAN Summit and an opening keynote from Vodafone's Iago Tenorio and Deutsche Telekom's Dr. Alex Jinsung Choi on the collaboration between TIP and the Open RAN Alliance.
So I think not very common to see TIP and Oran Alliance together on a stage. I think that sends a very clear message on why we're here today and also how the telecom industry is changing.
So the open ecosystem, Oran ecosystem, now counts more than 330 companies and institutions from all across the world.
In most of the regions, you have 3 players to choose from. In some regions, actually, one can't play, and you can only choose among 2. And that is a bit of a problem, because, of course, that's not enough competition.
The Open RAN State of the Union panel spoke to the challenges and opportunities in implementing open and disaggregated networks.
Yeah, the dream of openness is our goal. So we want to be open. However, the openness is an opportunity that creates a challenge. The challenge is the interoperability. So with interoperability, you need companies to cooperate with each other. Companies that literally should compete with each other. Oran Alliance as well as TIP will bring this platform, or they will be the enabler for the platform for all those companies to come together.
We need smarter networks, we need the radio intelligent controller for that, and this is something that still has to be tested and worked on. So we need this block in addition to the rest, and then I believe smoothly we'll move into this all components integration that will also enable us to be the master of our networks and automate everything we need to do in this area.
The afternoon session kicked off with sessions focused on value and testing.
But I think when we have this conversation, we forget to talk about total cost of ownership. And we use that a lot. You see, in every conversation, we talk about TCO, but many times when we're talking about TCO, we're just talking about CapEx, right? We're just talking about the components price. Also, highlight the values of having, from the cost point of view, of having a virtualized open platform.
And for testing is something that no single supplier can afford, or even no single operator can afford by himself.
There's no question, like what Samir said, testing is important. I would even go on to say testing has to be on steroids for this to work. And the reason I'm going to say that is there are just so many components coming into play.
Another hot topic today was that of the RAN Intelligence Controller, or RIC.
But the way I often think about the RIC, given that my organization is quite a fan of the capability, is the Radio Innovation Center. A lot of the 5G deployments that we've seen happen, right, have been built around enhanced mobile broadband, right, trying to enhance, for lack of a better word, people's consumer broadband experience. But we're looking for how to accelerate the deployment adoption of 5G, and obviously, as we've heard throughout the day, right, that's driven by where the money's coming from. So trying to find, that return on investment, that innovation, with the RIC, is something that I think is still evolving.
That's all for day one here at FYUZ 2022. Head on over to Telecom Infra Project on LinkedIn for more updates. We're back for day 2 tomorrow, which sees the opening of the TIP Summit. See you there.
All right. So that's day 1 of FYUZ. So let me just highlight some of the important topics that were mentioned. First, we want to highlight why are there 2 organizations that seem to be the major players or groups in pushing the Open RAN concept. So we have, of course, the ORAN Alliance, and then we have the telecom infra project. So the ORAN and TIP are the two organizations that are more actively creating the foundations for the Open RAN ecosystem to mature and drive adoption. So they work in close collaboration actually, but perform different functions. So the ORAN Alliance develops the open specifications that define Open RAN, whereas TIP makes sure that products that comply with its specifications meet the performance requirements of operators' use cases. So in turn, both the ORAN Alliance and TIP rely on other organizations such as 3GPP, ONF, and GSMA because these really are the standard producing bodies. Now, because of the slower pace and more complex processes of 3GPP, actually Open RAN innovation cannot yet rely on 3GPP. At the same time, well, 3GPP could create the foundation for a new type of Open RAN in which open interfaces become a global standard, ultimately growing market demand, which will then drive compliance to specifications and performance as vendors need to demonstrate their ability to deploy their products in multi-vendor, of course, disaggregated networks to meet operators' requirements. So again, in this context, ORAN Alliance drafts the specifications and then si TIP siya yung taga-push ng mga vendors to comply with the specifications being made by the Alliance. Madalas na mention, it is always mentioned in FYUZ about the need for cooperation, even among competitors in that space. Why? So compliance to open interfaces is required for interoperability, but it's not sufficient to establish it. So testing between pairs of elements is necessary to demonstrate interoperability. So as the number of products grows, so does the number of required tests. So testing must be repeated when a new product version is released. So this means that testing, certification, and badging, which is being done by TIP, will become a continuous process within the RAN ecosystem. Now, in turn, interoperability is required, but not sufficient to ensure performance parity with non-Open RAN architectures. So understandably, mobile operators require the Open RAN performance and features to be the same as those of non-Open RAN network. So interface compliance and interoperability demonstrate that products can work together, but do not tell us how well they work together. So performance must also be tested for the relevant environments and use cases to determine if it meets the operator's requirements. So in short, in one side, we're actually glad that the Open RAN opens the market to more vendors, but on the other side, the flip side is that every time a new product is created, whether be it hardware or software, because of the need for interoperability, we must make sure that the new product will work as good as the alternative, which is the non-Open RAN. So that's what makes the whole ecosystem really complex. But nonetheless, it still invites innovation within the ecosystem in terms of competition. So there's competition, but at the same time, it requires cooperation among vendors. TCO, or the total cost of ownership, was also mentioned in the discussion. Of course, if you are a mobile operator, you're in the business of making profit. And when you're in the business of making profit, as much as possible, you want to make the best use of your investments. So get a good profit margin. while at the same time delivering or meeting the requirements of your user base. So how can you, or does Open RAN really has that promise of keeping the TCO or total cost of ownership down? So an operator may choose the lowest cost vendors and minimize the investment in system integration and optimization that will deliver, well, the total cost of ownership really down than a single vendor traditional RAN with a more expensive tier 1 vendor. But the TCO cost savings from choosing a multi-vendor virtualized Open RAN, let's say with the best of breed solutions in advanced optimization and automation over a single vendor Open RAN with similar capabilities, are likely to make modest savings, if at any at all. So the Open RAN equipment costs may be lower, mas mura siya, but the system integration costs may be higher. So again, we see two sides of the scenario. So you can, as an operator, you can choose to buy a lower cost equipment or solution. You choose the lowest cost always. But then there's the other situation where you have to make sure that everything works together. They are interoperable. So there's a new entity, which is the system integrator, that comes into play. Whereas before, it is only the vendor that is responsible for all of this. Now, in some ways, the mobile network operators also has to make its own strategy on making things work together. So the additional initial system integration costs are a valuable midterm to long-term investment. So ganun yung paningin ng ibang operators about this Open RAN investment. Now let's talk about the whole ecosystem of the Open RAN. Of course, from the different vendors to the different considerations of the mobile network operators. Now, because interoperability and optimization are no longer in the hands of the RAN vendor, as I mentioned earlier, they become a collective responsibility of the ecosystem. So vendors must work closely with each other during the product development process to ensure that the products will eventually interoperate. Whereas mobile operators must take a more active role in selecting the desired set of vendors, also verifying interoperability and integrating all the solutions in their network. So actually, this is where testing labs, such as those set up by the Open RAN Alliance, TIP, and mobile operators and vendors come in. Ganun ka-importante yung mga testing labs natin. So instead of creating vendor lock-in, testing labs demonstrate how different vendors can work together in a network. So this gives mobile operators a way to see what could work in their network, and they will still need to test the RAN configuration, but they will be able to cut down the search space. So currently, again, there is no real standard, approved standard for Open RAN. And what TIP does is that they have a badging system. So not yet a full certification. It's in another stage. So right now they have the badging process wherein TIP can certify the set of products according to their tests are operating at the required performance levels. So that's what's happening currently among vendors and with TIP and their testing labs. All right. Another important concept that was also mentioned is RIC, or the RAN Intelligent Controller. So, di ba what happened is that from the closed RAN to Open RAN, so parang na-break yung system into several subsystems, open subsystems, And of course, given that you have possible multiple vendors and multiple systems, then there must be an intelligence that makes sure that they will all work together in harmony. So the RIC is important because it brings intelligent decision-making to run using AI and machine learning. So one way to think of this is that if the RAN were a human body, then the RIC would be the brain. So ganun lang natin siya isipin. So it provides intelligence and programmability to the RAN and enables the onboarding of third-party applications. So these applications can use intelligence from the networks to orchestrate, optimize, and assure operations in the RAN. They can also enable new use cases such as assurance for edge computing. So hence, it's not just the front end that is important, but also the computing side of the whole ecosystem. So again, there's an ongoing discussion on how well-rounded or how specific the hardware should be to perform all of these tasks. All right, so from day one, we move on to day two, which is the Telecom Infra Project Summit. So let's see kung ano yung diniscuss for day two.
Hello and welcome to Madrid for day two of Mobile World Live's coverage of FYUZ 2022. Today saw the beginning of the TIP Summit with Executive Director Christian Toivo kicking off proceedings on the main stage by highlighting the extent of TIP's progress so far.
This is a community. You are the community out there and many other people who are maybe not physically here but mentally and virtually part of everything we do. This is a big community. There's more than 650 participants in TIP. There's more than 100 service providers, operators, ISPs, whatever you want to call them in different parts of the world, but people who run organizations who deliver services based on connectivity solutions. There's 90 plus, so close to 100 vendors, OEMs that are part of our community and actively contributing, working in the project groups and the solution groups. And there's more than 120 integrators, infra providers, aggregators of various kind that take those wonderful products and solutions and make them available for the service providers to run their business and applications on.
The TIP board came together to share insights and lessons learned to date. Director of Connectivity and Partnerships of Meta Platforms, Samira Narangi, spoke about the collaboration's progress in terms of specifications, testing and validation.
The number of companies that are contributing to Open RAN continues to increase, which is fantastic, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Without the IT solutions that are needed to deploy all this disaggregated ecosystem that we talk about here, it wouldn't be possible.
It has been challenging for the all industry and not just Intel. But if you look at the history of how we supply to the cloud, how the diversity of that far exceeds what we're doing with network.
Today, most of the operators have to take what's designed for enterprise and make it work, you know, in this new software world. But we ourselves, with Caroline and many other companies, we're really investing a lot of time in new products that are specifically fit for operators.
The morning continued with an exploration of Indonesia as a case study and a blueprint for how investment in open networks, infrastructure and skills can reap real rewards.
And this collaboration that we call Quad Helix collaboration is a good collaboration model because we work together to achieve our common goals. And with the program that has already been implemented, we have seen a significant increasing in community awareness. And we expect TIP and Telecom University to become great partners to our local community and become a driving force for ecosystem development in Indonesia.
Ana Armas, telco director at NTT Data in Mexico, reflected on the broader value of public-private partnerships and the role that Open RAN can play in making coverage more accessible to the masses.
Because what is the point of making connectivity if it's not can reach not only people, but it can be affordable and profitable, right?
That's all for day 2 here at FYUZ 2022. Make sure you follow Telecom Infra Project on LinkedIn for more updates. And join us tomorrow for the 3rd day when the Metaverse Connectivity Summit kicks off. See you then.
All right. So on your screen, you can see the different open trials and developments happening around the world. If you look at around Asia, specifically the Philippines, you can see that, well, as of publishing this image, there's nothing happening yet regarding any open trial or deployments. All right. However, obviously, over the years, we can see clearly that Open RAN is gaining global momentum, of course, due to the push of the O-RAN Alliance and TIP. So more than 35 Open RAN trials and developments from 29 different operators across more than 20 countries to date, including China, Egypt, France, Indonesia, Italy, Russia, Sri Lanka, Turkey, and, well, everywhere else in the world. So actually what's interesting in this figure is that there's something happening around Asia, specifically in Indonesia. So TIP helps the ecosystem to build, test, and even procure Open RAN equipment in a more efficient way. And this turns it into a catalyst to deliver commercial Open RAN products that can be deployed in the field. So collaboration through TIP aligns product requirements and reduces the total testing workload for all Open RAN stakeholders. So TIP also makes it possible for each operator to focus on the activities that are more valuable for their particular business needs. So I mentioned about ecosystem earlier, wherein the vendor is also, the vendor and the mobile network operators are both responsible now in their networks, but also is TIP. So TIP is sharing the heavy workload of testing these new products. So instead of the mobile network operators putting up their own lab, although there are some who does, like Vodafone, they have their own testing lab. TIP also does this around the world. And these are on your screen, the different testing labs and community labs. So the TIP Open RAN Protect group has made significant progress. TIP created a revised charter focused on accelerating the development and deployment of Open RAN solutions across all radio technologies. So to support that, they have created different subgroups. So this approach is already delivering results with significant engagements across the ecosystem. All right, so in this figure, we can see the different TIP community labs. So again, within the TIP community labs, they do the testing, and after testing, verification, they deploy the tested equipment in real scenarios to get validation results. So as part of efforts to significantly improve connectivity, I'll focus on Indonesia because they were featured at the day 2 of FYUZ. TIP Community Lab was launched as the first stage of a new multi-year collaboration between the GSMA, TIP, the Indonesian government, TELU or Telkom University, and MNOs, their mobile network operators, to support Indonesia's Making Indonesia 4.0 program. So they have a clear roadmap on what to do over their connectivity for the next couple of years. So the community lab brings MNOs in Indonesia together to work hand in hand with other TIP members. So something that doesn't usually happen. So the community lab will allow participants to evaluate and adopt solutions developed by TIP project groups and feed results and new requirements back into the TIP community for further development. So how we wish that the same will happen very soon in our own country, para we can also experience what they are experiencing back there in Indonesia. All right, then in that afternoon, so ito na, this is where I really participate. We have the policy ambassadors workshop. The workshop is actually a closed door and off limits to media, to the public, simply because they want the participants to feel more free in sharing their experiences with their ongoing developments regarding Open RAN. So one section of that workshop is called the Public-Private Partnerships Lessons from Across the World. So in that workshop, the speakers were me, Paul Creeley, Director of Technology Strategy of UK. There's another one from the US, another one from Peru. He's representing university. They also have a community lab. And from Indonesia, Ms. Lia, which is the Director of Strategic Partnerships and International Office of Telkom University. So in that workshop, I narrated the story behind what we're doing in the Philippines, which is the Asia Open RAN Academy. And I shared to them how enthusiastic the local players are. There's a well representation from the network operators, the government, the mobile players, the vendors, and everyone. It seems that everyone is really hyped up for this Asia Open RAN Academy, and everything is moving quite fast and moving quite well. So that's what I shared with the group. And I also learned about the story behind the community lab that were established in Indonesia. I guess what worked well with Indonesia is that they have a clear roadmap and what they want to happen in their country for the next couple of years. And they appreciate the potential of the Open RAN in bridging the digital divide in their country, which is also very similar with what's happening in our country. So actually, whatever Indonesia has learned so far, I guess we can learn from them, since we are both archipelagic, and they have also geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas. So I really look forward to visiting them probably next year and learn more about their developments and what they have learned so far, especially with their community labs. All right, and then we move on to day 3 of FYUZ. This one is hosted by Meta, Facebook.
It's our third and final day here in Madrid at FYUZ 2022, and today is all about the metaverse. The day began with Austin Chang, Director of Product Design at Meta, laying out some key definitions.
The first thing to understand is that the metaverse is the evolution of our desire to capture and share the world around us, because it's really going to transform the way that we live, work, and play. Next year, we're going to be taking our social metaverse product, Horizon Worlds, and bringing them to everyone on the mobile devices and the PCs that they own today. So these experiences will be available on desktop web and mobile web. You'll be able to quickly set up an account, create an avatar for yourself, and then enter this 3D immersive space, even if you don't have a headset yet. And we believe this will open up the opportunities of the metaverse to more people.
However, Chang recognized that Meta and the metaverse can't achieve their full potential without some help.
Our vision for the metaverse is open and interoperable. This is not something we're going to build alone. Just like the internet, it's going to require a lot of partnership with people like you to bring this vision to life. Everything I've shown you today, from the next generation of computing hardware to these interoperable technologies such as avatars that enable these interconnected immersive experiences, are all made possible by internet connectivity.
In the Metaverse 360 panel, Nick Rosa from Accenture highlighted the network infrastructure necessary to achieve the metaverse vision.
We know that the future of the metaverse is in the cloud, and in order to create this kind of experience, you will need a big pipeline of data with low latency. If you think about how it's different from mobile right now you open a mobile page and then it's downloaded in the cache of your phone. When you're in a metaverse experience, the data go back and forth from your phone to the servers because you have to get voice, visuals, information from all the other users in real time. So it's a huge opportunity for telcos in order to capitalize this kind of, the traffic.
Vodafone's Marta de Pablos Alvaro concurred, urging telcos not to make the same mistake with 5G as they made with fourth-generation networks.
Because in 4G, what happened in the end is that all the telcos, we provided the networks, but we didn't monetize the service layer. We were just connectivity pipes, no?
Yeah.
I think that was a mistake we committed in general as an industry, and the result of this is that what I see is that all the 5G deployment and everything could be even delayed if we don't see the return of the investment. And so for me, it's important that telcos also understand how to monetize this part of his part of the cake, because this is going to accelerate the deployment of those infrastructures, edge computing, 5G, that are infrastructure very, very expensive and very hard to deploy.
Comcast's Executive Director of Wireless Strategy, Erica Sivertson, shared how their network is taking a front-foot approach to building agile, metaverse-ready networks.
We've built this platform on which we're actually able to innovate and build additional capacity at a pretty rapid pace. And using that hybrid fiber coaxial architecture, it's allowed us to both bridge all of those topologies and then those legacy technologies. And when we think about all the other capabilities, which you mentioned, automation and some of the other things, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we were able to rapidly adjust and completely absorb that additional demand. And so we're moving rapidly forward. And when we think about metaverse readiness, this is pretty critical for us.
The afternoon sessions didn't dodge the difficult questions, with Blair Levin from the Brookings Institution asking how the metaverse can be applied to tackle society's biggest problems.
The metaverse's value is that immersion is more compelling. Then we ought to be thinking about how we can teach kids to read.
Yeah, and do math.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, look, we all know that the kids who know how to read tend to be those kids whose parents read to them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reality is that's not going to be everybody, but can we do something to make it better for those kids? That's a big problem. And I thought some of the applications were really interesting to me, but they weren't big applications.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to see something that was really taking on a really big societal problem.
As well as feasting on some of the best food at a telecoms industry event that we can remember, visitors to FYUZ 2022 have met more than 30 sponsors, attended more than 50 keynotes and panels, and heard from more than 150 speakers. That is all from Mobile World Live here in Madrid. Head over to our FYUZ 2022 page for more stories and exclusive interviews. But for now, until next time, bye-bye.
So the third day of FYUZ focused on Meta. So Meta is one of the founding members of TIP, and Meta is really, really serious about establishing the metaverse. So as you know, Mark Zuckerberg has already invested a lot of resources into really making metaverse a reality. While this is true, they also admitted that they cannot do it alone. So they need the help of the whole ecosystem to make it happen. So applications such as Meta or the metaverse push the boundaries of technology. So the requirements for Meta, the technical requirements are really high, because just imagine yourself being in a more immersive digital environment, and you have things that are being data that are being downloaded to your phone or your mobile device or laptop, and then you're at the same time you're also streaming out information. And imagine this happening for a lot or millions of people in that metaverse. So really, there's a really big requirement or a push to move the current specifications of mobile technology further to satisfy and better experience the metaverse. So that's why Meta is really pushing for this Open RAN to happen. All right. So that's the third day of the session. So let me share some of my insights after attending that 3-day event. So first, how fast is the adoption of the Open RAN? I think it depends on the country and the policy. Europe has been very aggressive, as well as some countries in Asia, like Japan and Indonesia. So technically, it's moving along, but the development itself of Open RAN, it's quite fast. It's really happening, of course, with the help of TIP, and it is expected to mature by around 2025. Next, where will Open RAN be deployed first? Meaning, if there's a network, a given network, where will it be deployed? Will it be in the rural setting, suburban, or the rural? There has been a lot of discussions about this, but really it's more advantageous for greenfield players like Dish. And most likely it can happen first or be deployed first in rural areas or less dense areas, simply because there's a less risk in those areas. So it is really more advantageous for greenfield operators. Now, for brownfield operators, I guess what will happen is that it will start from the fringe, from the rural areas, and then once they have established their competency, their trust in building that network, then they will start integrating Open RAN from the outside of their network, moving in to the center. How many vendors really are needed to establish Open RAN? Well, actually, it's not stable yet. It's good to have a lot of players, but it's really hard to imagine if there will be really a lot of players, simply because, as I mentioned earlier, if there's any new product that will be introduced into the market, then you would have to test that new product for all other existing products and with different layers of that product. So it adds to the testing and validation complexity. So every new vendor will add to the permutation of testing. So probably it will stabilize to, I don't know, quite a few, depending on the segment of the network. Is single Open RAN possible? Single vendor Open RAN possible? I guess so. Yes, initially, especially for those who are really aggressive in developing their technologies. So it's quite counterintuitive, but of course, you want to somehow control the risk. So you might want to start with a single vendor. And then once you have the confidence, you start replacing some aspects of your network with the possibility of choosing another vendor, depending on the experience of others. Next, will Open RAN become the default architecture? As of today, not yet, but it really depends if it is endorsed as the standard. I would say that for 5G, it is a bit too late because, of course, 5G is already being deployed. But hopefully, 6G, then Open RAN will be the default architecture. Will Open RAN be as good as closed RAN? Well, it should, because otherwise, why are we moving to Open RAN? So it's really, it is imperative, or it is a requirement that the Open RAN will be as good as the alternative, which is the closed RAN or the single vendor or closed vendor environment. Is Open RAN sustainable? it is envisioned the whole system, different segments of the network, it is envisioned to be really power efficient. But there's a bit of complexity, as I understand, because even if you design your system or product to be really power efficient, it can be complicated by interoperability with respect to other systems. So if it's not working very well across the whole line, then some segment of that whole end-to-end solution might consume more power. So hopefully it will be sustainable. Is Open RAN more secure? It should, and it's always considered in the design. But again, this is the trade-off of having an open architecture. So having different players means that you always have to test all aspects of security vulnerability of that network. So the vendors are and the developers are really keen on making this whole ecosystem very secure as attacks become more complicated nowadays. So here's my personal wish list based on what I've heard over that event. First, I hope that the country will have its own roadmap for network innovation, similar to what other countries are doing or have developed. So for this one, of course, we need the cooperation of the whole players, from the private, the academe, especially in the government, the ICT, NTC, us at the OST, to review and update the policies, influence legislators, review the spectrum, etc., etc. So Open RAN can only flourish if there's the full support of the whole ecosystem. Next, I also wish that for Open RAN, for the government to incentivize and support Open RAN development. So that could be tax incentives or more budget for establishing community labs, testing labs, and even doing R&D. That would be interesting for us in the country. And of course, promote collaboration. But based on my experience so far, at least for the Asian Open RAN, I would say that there are a lot of willing cooperators for this to happen. But there are some few institutions that we wish to get more involved with. And I know Tony knows them very well. So to conclude, Open RAN really is a revolution in network connectivity. It is not just an evolution. It's really breaking the glass ceiling and a new philosophy that some people or some sectors might not be comfortable with, but they should accept and understand the potentials of having the Open RAN technology being adopted. So it's really exciting if it really does flourish and progress, not just in the country, but being adopted globally. And of course, our country, the Philippines, has a place in this ecosystem. First, we have the Asia Open RAN Academy being developed, which is, of course, we want to upskill our workforce, and also for students to be more open and more ready for the upcoming technologies. We can do R&D. The DOST is there to perform R&D for Open RAN, and also probably, of course, be part of the supply chain. As we know, electronics is a big part of our export in the economy. So probably the Philippines will be there to become part of the supply chain. But hopefully we could move from just manufacturing to also designing, where there's more value. Probably develop hardware and software as well, but that would require, of course, competent workforce. So again, that's why we have the Asia Open RAN being developed, right? So these are just some snapshots of the whole personal experience at FYUZ. So thank you for listening. So from Spain, we go back to the Philippines. Yeah. Thank you. All right, there's a question there. I'm reading. Okay. Do we have a schedule for a baseline for ORAN deployment or trial? I cannot really answer that one straightforward. Of course, that would depend on the pace of our operators. But as we know, Globe and Smart are really heavily invested in the Open RAN concept. They are actively participating in this discussion. Of course, for example, I have to mention this. Smart has already established 5G lab at Ateneo, but that one is closed RAN. So I'm really hoping that with Open RAN and with further discussions with TIP, a similar community lab can be established. But in the establishment of this Open RAN, we're really keen not just on the upskill development of our workforce and students, but also on R&D. Because I'm at DOST, of course, we want to have R&D with respect to Open RAN. And I would say that we really have a chance because if you would notice, the whole Open RAN concept is banking on virtualization. So a lot is really happening at the IT side, at the programming side. So for the whole spectrum of Open RAN, we really have a chance to contribute for Open RAN. So on some segment or some technology. And I hope that this could happen hopefully by next year. And then we also hope to do some benchmarking with TIP-TelU in Indonesia next year. As I understand, they have also started their deployments they've already developed something out there, and they started gathering data in some parts of Indonesia. It would be really nice if we could do something similar and really learn from them.
Thank you, Dr. Franz. We have another question from Catherine. You mentioned greenfield as being lower risk for Open RAN deployment. Can you expand more on why that is?
Yeah, because for greenfield operator, they don't have existing legacy networks that they have to replace with. So if you're a new operator, it means that there's a less risk for you. So you could, depending on your risk appetite, well, for one, you will not be breaking any legacy system. Number two, if you deploy the Open RAN system, there's not much a problem with regards to making sure that it interoperates with the legacy network, because that's what one of the important things that an operator considers, that will the new system work with the existing system? If not, then it doesn't really make any sense for me to buy this new equipment because it's not backward compatible. So for greenfield operators, they have this slight advantage of having less risk as compared to brownfield operators.
Thank you, Dr. Franz. A question from Margin Flores. Are there many opportunities for computer engineering in the Open RAN?
Yes, of course. There's an ongoing discussion on acceleration with regards to making the system work. Recall in the presentation, it was mentioned the RIC, the RAN Intelligent Controller, which would utilize edge computing, AI, machine learning. That would require somewhat specialized hardware. So that would really need computer engineers to develop that specific hardware and accelerate the performance of the Open RAN.
Thank you, Dr. Franz. Another one from RD. What does O-RAN player prefer when it comes to dimension flexibility? Open RAN interface or Cloud RAN?
I think both. Virtualization is a very much integral part of this whole discussion. Virtualization, putting into cloud. I haven't mentioned about transport. Transport is also important because you have to minimize delay. So that's what's happening actually with our communication technology. We want it to be as fast as possible. It can accommodate lots of people. At the same time, you want it to be low power, you want it to be low latency. So it's really pushing the boundary of technology. So again, this is still under development, the virtualization, the cloud run. I wish we could see some test results or probably read some good technical papers on the different configurations and see which one is, I guess it depends on the specification or the requirements or the priority of a certain operator on how they would want to decide their system. But I would really love to see our local operators share that information with us.
Another one from RD, one of the challenges in Open RAN is operation and maintenance in legacy single vendor RAN. Most MSPs select to use managed service, contract and monitor the performance based on predefined SLA. How it will be resolved in Open RAN that consists of multi-vendor and multi-system integrators?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question, and as I mentioned, dati kasi it's all the vendors are making all the promises. So they give the solution and they would say, oh, this is good for you to deploy. But with Open RAN, somehow our operators have to, first they have to have their appetite for risk assessed, how much innovation they want to do, because they would be making certain choices for themselves. They would have to rely on the information and their own research. And hopefully there are enough testing, validation, and integration results for them to rely on. So depende talaga siya sa vendor. And at the same time, there's a new sector that's propping up, yun nga, yung service integrator. It's like offloading what's been done by a single vendor. So now it's another business for one to test the different combinations or permutations of services. It's actually a lot. We could imagine that there's a real disaggregation between hardware and software, and then when there's an update, you have to test again. So it's really complex and hard, but also interesting what we can see. Again, we have to hear some experience from the operators themselves to really address or complete the picture of RD's question. Thank you.